What if I told you Yamaha once built an outboard engine so advanced it promised to revolutionize boating, yet it quietly disappeared from US waters? The Yamaha HPDI series combined power, efficiency, and cutting-edge tech. But something went wrong. Let's uncover the story behind these engines that faded into history. It all began at the end of the 1990s. Yamaha, already a dominant force in the marine engine world, introduced its high-pressure direct injection, or HPDI, outboard series. This wasn't just another engine line, it was Yamaha's bold, forward-thinking response to a serious challenge: the tightening US EPA emissions regulations. Traditional two-stroke outboards, known for their power and simplicity, were falling out of favor due to their higher emissions and thirstier fuel consumption. Meanwhile, four-strokes were gaining popularity, celebrated for cleaner operation and better fuel economy, but often at the cost of added weight and mechanical complexity. Yamaha's HPDI aimed to deliver the best of both worlds. It retained the lightweight, high-power characteristics of a two-stroke, but with drastically improved efficiency and cleaner emissions. The heart of this innovation was its direct injection system. Unlike traditional carbureted or low-pressure fuel-injected engines, HPDI used fuel injection pressures of up to 1,000 psi, spraying fuel directly into the combustion chamber at the precise moment it was needed. The result? A cleaner burn, reduced fuel waste, lower emissions, and surprisingly good fuel economy for a two-stroke. Marine journalists and boat testers were quick to praise Yamaha's creation. Early reviews called it a game-changer. Boaters loved the lighter weight compared to equivalent four-strokes. Fewer moving parts meant, in theory, less to go wrong. And that signature two-stroke punch? It was still there. Instant throttle response and exhilarating acceleration. Even better, the HPDI ran quieter and smoked far less than older two-strokes, addressing two of the biggest complaints about traditional designs. At first glance, it seemed Yamaha had cracked the code. But beneath this promising start, challenges were lurking, ones that would soon define the HPDI's legacy. Also, if you're enjoying this, hit subscribe and like. Don't miss more boating stories like this. Got an HPDI tale? Comment below. By the early 2000s, Yamaha's HPDI series was hitting its stride. What started as a bold experiment in two-stroke technology quickly evolved into a full lineup covering a wide range of horsepower needs. Boaters could now choose HPDI engines in 150, 175, 200, 225, 250, and eventually 300 horsepower models. This range allowed Yamaha to target everyone from freshwater base anglers chasing trophies in tight lakes to offshore captains running long distances in open water. The appeal was obvious. HPDI engines delivered cleaner emissions and better fuel economy compared to older two-strokes, satisfying tightening EPA standards, yet still provided the lightweight, simplicity, and instant power that two-stroke fans loved. In an era when four-strokes were heavier and often seen as sluggish by performance-minded boaters, the HPDI felt like the perfect middle ground. And it wasn't just the customers who were excited. Dealers couldn't keep them in stock. The combination of modern technology and that classic two-stroke punch made HPDI engines a hot ticket item. Center consoles tearing across the Gulf, tournament bass boats racing between fishing spots, and family boats looking for speed without guzzling fuel all found a home with HPDI power. For a moment, it looked like Yamaha had cracked the code. The HPDI was being hailed as a smart solution, blending innovation with tradition. But under the surface, the very things that made the HPDI unique would soon present serious challenges. Challenges that would ultimately shape its place in US boating history. Now here's the twist. What seemed perfect on paper would soon face real-world problems no one expected. Let's dive in. So, what went wrong? On paper, the Yamaha HPDI seemed like the perfect outboard. Light, powerful, efficient. But in reality, its advanced fuel system introduced a level of complexity that wasn't always suited to the conditions it faced out on the water. The HPDI's fuel delivery system was cutting-edge, but also demanding. It relied on extremely high fuel pressure, up to 1,000 psi, delivered through multiple stages: low-pressure lift pumps, medium-pressure pumps, and finally, a high-pressure pump feeding precision injectors. This setup depended on crystal-clean fuel. Any contamination, water, debris, or varnish from old gas could spell disaster. And that's exactly what started happening. Reports began to surface across the US. Boaters complained of sudden power loss, hard starts, or engines that wouldn't start at all. Mechanics, when they dug in, found clogged filters, gummed-up injectors, and high-pressure pumps that had failed or were on their way out. The issue wasn't bad design as much as bad fuel, something increasingly common as ethanol blends became widespread at marinas. The HPDI's advanced system just wasn't forgiving. What might pass unnoticed in a carbureted or even a standard EFI engine could cripple an HPDI. It was a tough lesson. The same technology that made HPDI engines special also made them vulnerable. And for many boaters, that vulnerability came with a high price. You see, in theory, Yamaha's HPDI technology was brilliant. It offered the promise of cleaner, more efficient two-stroke power without sacrificing performance. But in practice, that promise collided hard with the messy realities of US fuel supplies, aging fuel tanks, and typical boat maintenance habits. Simply put, the HPDI was designed for ideal conditions, and those conditions were rare out on the water. The HPDI's three-stage fuel system was at the heart of both its innovation and its Achilles heel. First, low-pressure lift pumps drew fuel from the tank. Then medium-pressure pumps fed it towards the injectors. Finally, the critical high-pressure pump boosted fuel to around 1,000 psi before spraying it into the combustion chamber. This system required absolute cleanliness. Yamaha specified multiple fuel filters, and they weren't optional. They were essential. Filters had to be changed frequently. A single missed service or a bad tank of fuel could mean clogged injectors, damaged pumps, and costly repairs. It wasn't just owners noticing the issues. Independent marine techs began warning customers about the HPDI's sensitivity. Forums and dockside chatter filled with tales of blown high-pressure pumps, gummed-up injectors, and expensive fixes. But here's the kicker. While HPDI owners struggled with these challenges, Yamaha was already working behind the scenes on a replacement. Technology that would quietly acknowledge the flaws and set a new standard for outboards. And in just a moment, we'll reveal what engine dethroned HPDI and why it mattered so much. Quick reminder, if you're finding this story eye-opening, hit subscribe and like. Don't miss the rest of this cautionary tale. By the mid-2000s, the writing was on the wall for Yamaha's HPDI series. The outboard world was changing fast. Four-stroke engines, once seen as heavy and sluggish, were improving at an incredible pace. Brands like Honda, Mercury, and even Yamaha's own four-stroke lineup were closing the performance gap. Four strokes were getting lighter, more powerful, and increasingly popular with boaters who valued simplicity and reliability. Meanwhile, the HPDI's reputation was beginning to suffer. What had been marketed as advanced technology started to earn labels like fussy or high maintenance. Stories of fuel-related failures spread among boat owners. And for offshore captains, tournament anglers, and long-distance cruisers, trust in the HPDI eroded. No one wanted to risk a trip or a crossing on an engine that might fail simply because of fuel contamination, something outside the owner's control in many cases. Yamaha wasn't blind to these concerns. The company tried to tackle the issues with upgrades, better fuel filters, improved injectors, revised high-pressure pumps. But by then, the damage was done. The HPDI had developed a reputation, and reputations are hard to shake. Adding to the challenge, the fuel landscape was only getting worse for HPDI owners. Ethanol content in marine fuel was increasing. Old fuel tanks were breaking down and shedding debris. Water intrusion became more common as boats aged. The HPDI's advanced systems weren't designed to cope with this messy reality. And as four-strokes took over, the HPDI's days were clearly numbered. By 2012, Yamaha had effectively phased out the HPDI series from the US market. After more than a decade of ambitious innovation and hard lessons, Yamaha shifted its focus toward what boaters were demanding: four-stroke engines that offered reliability, fuel efficiency, and the ability to handle modern fuel realities without constant worry. Taking over the segment that HPDI once dominated were Yamaha's four-stroke V6 and V8 outboards, including the wildly successful F225, F250, and later the F300. These engines delivered comparable horsepower, cleaner emissions, and rock-solid dependability, all without the fuel system headaches that had plagued HPDI owners. The boating world had spoken, and Yamaha had listened. While the HPDI continued to be sold in certain international markets for a few more years, especially where fuel standards and preferences differed, its time in the US was done. The HPDI's promise of bridging the gap between two-stroke punch and four-stroke responsibility ultimately couldn't overcome its Achilles heel: sensitivity to fuel quality and maintenance lapses. Yet, despite all this, ask a boater who owned a well-maintained HPDI, and you'll often hear fond memories. When an HPDI worked, it worked beautifully. The combination of speed, fuel economy, and sheer two-stroke power was exhilarating. But that thrill came at a risk most boaters eventually decided wasn't worth taking. And so, the HPDI became a chapter in US marine history rather than the future Yamaha had envisioned. The story of Yamaha's HPDI series isn't just a tale of an engine that faded into history. It's a valuable lesson for boaters and manufacturers alike. First, technology must match the environment. The HPDI was brilliant on paper, but real-world conditions, like inconsistent fuel quality and the rise of ethanol blends, exposed its vulnerabilities. No matter how advanced an engine is, it has to thrive in the messy realities of boating. Second, fuel quality matters. The HPDI era taught boaters to pay closer attention to what's in their tanks. Clean fuel, proper storage, and good filtration weren't optional. They were critical. And with ethanol becoming more common, this lesson still applies today. Third, the HPDI's fall marked the end of high-horsepower two-strokes from Yamaha in the US. The rise of reliable, fuel-efficient four-strokes sealed that chapter. Four-strokes became the standard, delivering what boaters wanted without the high-maintenance risks. Finally, Yamaha deserves credit for adapting fast. Rather than doubling down on HPDI tech, they pivoted. They refined their four-stroke lineup and led the way with innovations like variable cam timing, digital throttles, and integrated controls, setting the stage for the modern outboards we see today. Today, Yamaha HPDI engines are still out there. You'll spot them on used boats at marinas, boatyards, and online listings, often at prices that seem almost too good to be true. And in many cases, they are. The temptation is clear. a high-horsepower Yamaha outboard for a fraction of the cost of a newer four-stroke. But buyers should tread carefully. Parts for HPDI engines can be hard to source and expensive when you do find them. Specialized components like high-pressure fuel pumps, injectors, and filters don't come cheap. And because these engines are so sensitive to fuel quality and maintenance history, you're gambling on how well the previous owner cared for it. Without meticulous upkeep, you could find yourself facing costly repairs or chasing hard-to-find parts, turning that bargain into a headache. That said, not everyone avoids them. Enthusiasts and marine techs who understand these engines inside and out can keep them running reliably. Some owners swear by HPDIs even today, praising their unique blend of old-school two-stroke punch and modern fuel efficiency when they're maintained properly. For these folks, the HPDI isn't a nightmare. It's a piece of engineering worth preserving. Thinking of buying one? Do your homework and make sure you know what you're getting into. Now, looking at something which you all must be thinking. So where does the Yamaha HPDI sit in the grand timeline of outboard innovation? In many ways, it holds a unique and bittersweet spot, somewhere between brilliant experiment and cautionary tale. The HPDI was Yamaha's last great push to keep high-horsepower two-stroke technology alive in a market that was shifting rapidly toward four strokes. It was bold, ambitious, and genuinely innovative. But at the same time, it exposed the limits of pushing technology that didn't fully align with changing real-world conditions. The HPDI represents the end of an era, the final chapter for two-stroke dominance in the US outboard market. After its phase-out, Yamaha and most other manufacturers doubled down on four-stroke development. The marine world moved on, leaving HPDI as a fascinating footnote, a reminder of how even the most promising technology can fall short if the environment it enters changes too fast. And here's something to think about. As we now move toward electric outboards, hybrid marine systems, and digital drive technology, could the HPDI story be a preview of what's to come? Will some of today's cutting-edge marine tech seem brilliant for a few years, only to fade as conditions and expectations shift again? The HPDI reminds us that innovation must always be balanced with practicality, and that no technology, no matter how advanced, is immune to obsolescence. If you've made it this far, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a fascinating chapter of marine history. Be sure to subscribe, drop a comment with your HPDI memories or questions, and hit like if you want more videos like this. Until next time, safe boating, and may your outboard always bring you home.